So first, I think it's important to just start here. You guys have all been beaten over the head about the history of humans here on planet Earth. Not very many of us. And then 160,000 years ago, you get the first Homo sapiens, but it's really just a few thousand, few million, and not until the last 200 years did we hit this hockey stick growth curve and go from millions to billions. So we're doing something unprecedented. We're trying to keep 8 billion people going. We don't know if it's going to work. So we are all made of stars. All of the energy on Earth came from this star, our sun. That's not just solar power and photosynthesis, but also the oil and the gas, and actually the uranium came from other stars. But basically it all comes from stars. So if you add up all of the energy an average American or average human on Earth gets, it's about equivalent to one toaster. If you super glue the button down, run it 24 hours a day, you're going to get about the same amount of energy as one toaster. That's all your heating, cooling, food, travel, air conditioning, everything combined is about one toaster. But where I come from, we get 8 bonus toasters, which is pretty fucking awesome. And if you want to know why there's inequality in the world, it is this. This is the reason. We made all these extra people. We've not made the energy we need for them to thrive. So you will see people show up with a growth curve for energy showing a few % a year in growth and demand. That is not true. That is a lie. This is the real demand for energy on planet Earth. We need a 10x global energy production. That is the truth. And once we accept that, then we can start getting on to talking about how we're actually going to do it. Now, we have 10x global energy production before. We did it over the last century. Now, we did it by burning more coal and oil and gas, and we're going to keep doing that, but we probably don't want to 10x those things. Hopefully we learned our lesson. So we have to figure out how we're going to do better. This seems miraculous. Solar panels are amazing, but they suffer from 2 big problems: clouds and nighttime. The relentless onslaught of night is fucking with our solar panels. And we don't know what to do about it. Germany didn't seem to catch that. When I was a kid, German engineers are the smartest people in the world. Let's see how they're doing now. This orange line is the one they brag about. So that's German solar deployment, right? They're up to 60 gigawatts or more. This blue line down at the bottom that nobody ever talks about is called capacity factor. It's the actual amount of energy derived from those solar panels. And you can see when things are going well in the summer, they get almost 20% of what they paid for. Fun fact, in Germany, in the winter, the sun don't shine. So they get about 2 or 3% of the energy they paid for. This is not a solution. We are lying to ourselves, okay? People need the lights on at night. They need to be warm in the winter. And so we'll let our storage experts talk about how we're going to store energy from the summer to the winter. But in the meantime, we need a better solution. So you take the same solar panels and you put them up in space. It looks like it's nighttime. It's actually noon in space all the time. We just have a bad angle on it. So if you put a solar farm in space, it'll get sun 24 hours a day. And you can beam that energy down using radio waves. I know this sounds like science fiction. We're doing this now. It's not that hard. The technology, we have all the tech. The only hard part of this is launch cost. If you have been paying attention, launch cost, ironically, has crashed. So these are all the metals mined last year. And they all pale in comparison to this one. That's iron. We use that for making steel. But look at this. This one little pile, uranium, there's enough energy in that pile to power the entire planet. We're not doing that. We're mostly making bombs with it, but you know, that's what's possible. If you had a soup can full of that stuff, it would have enough energy to power you and your entire family for the rest of your lives. That's how energy dense uranium is. But it's radioactive and dangerous and messy, so we've been saving it in stockpiles for our grandkids. So we found this team that figured out how to make a new type of nuclear reactor. It fits through a manhole. It's only this big around. And they bury it a mile deep in a borehole under 10 billion tons of rock. It's literally a mile from anyone's backyard. Nothing can go wrong, but if it did, there'd be no radioactivity at the surface. This is a way of making what we call small modular reactors more practical. Because the cost problem of small modular reactors is you have to build a containment vessel, a Fort Knox worth of cement around a reactor to protect it in case a 747 crashes into it. Well, that's very expensive, and it's making a lot of these small reactors impractical. But we get that protection for free. And if you need more energy, we just drill more holes. Guess what? We have an industry that's really good at drilling holes in the earth. And they're going to need something to do when they run out of oil. So let's get started. Look, when we were kids, we conflated nuclear reactors with nuclear bombs. We got the wrong story in our head. We outlawed the wrong one. If we had done it the other way around, you never would have heard of global warming. That is what is possible. This is a stockpile in Kentucky, 700,000 metric tons of depleted uranium sitting on the surface of the earth. We've saved this up for our grandkids. There's enough energy in this left over in this one pile. We call it nuclear waste. No, that is fuel. There's enough energy there to power the entire planet, including growth, for about the next 1,000 years. We don't even need to mine uranium. We need to build advanced reactors. That's what's possible. The last thing I wanted to share with you guys is data centers are interesting. And one of the other things that's very important to talk about in energy is the life cycle of energy. At a data center, you pump electricity in there. I'm sure you've all been reading about that with AI. Half of it becomes heat. We don't need heat. Data center you can think of as a fancy electric heater. And what we want is the computation, but what we're getting is a lot of heat. And that heat, we just try to get rid of it. That's why you see people trying to put data centers in Iceland and stuff, right? Well, the truth is, we don't have the technology to turn that low-grade heat. It's a couple hundred degrees, it's 140 degrees Fahrenheit. You take that heat, you get rid of it in the sky. Well, we now have technology that can take that heat out of a data center, low-grade heat, and turn it back into electricity to feed the data center and cut the power bill by 20-25%. That's what's possible. So amazing technologies are coming. I can go on for days about this stuff, but I'll leave it there and we'll have a real discussion about what's coming. So thank you.
Thank you, Pablos. So before we get started on our panel, let's get some feedback about what you just said from our other expert panelists.
Wow. Mr. Works, thanks a lot. I thought that was fascinating, and I think it's not easy to tell the bigger picture and actually get it down to the micro and where the income is. So it's quite a diverse audience here. So I think the way that I would approach this is, first of all, investors, large investors, like to invest in what they understand and what is proven. And the challenge that we often find is that venture is quite difficult to mandate. But there are investors which are large utility companies or global energy companies that I've had discussions with that are thinking about nuclear 30 years ahead.
Yeah.
They're looking at the new projects now to invest in them. And I particularly like two themes that you presented. One was around SMR technologies, which I think is important, but from a price perspective, it's not bankable yet. And we've been telling the investors we've been looking at, most of them want the government to take that risk rather than the private investors. But the large pension funds that I've been speaking to are now putting teams together to try and understand nuclear technologies. And I've spoken also to some of the energy majors. They're less proactive. They're watching the space, I would say. But some of the asset managers, such as Brookfield, they've actually bought some assets within the SMR sector. But it is innovation. I mean, innovation always results in positive outcomes. It's just that there's a lot of losses, and then it becomes a kind of 10 investments and one will be a blockbuster. But the data center, electricity recycling, that's something I'm very interested in. So we're actually have one investor that I'm in discussions with that has between 200 million and 1 billion to allocate into a data center strategy. And I also had a meeting with one of the top 4 data center owners globally in Davos. So that's something worth picking up on. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, very interesting. I think, well, we started as a very innovative company, you see, so we are kind of reinventing stuff, like the gravitational system is just made out of a new design from a pump hydro system, which is the first system for energy storage. So we can...
You have to hold your
Okay.
really close to your mouth.
Okay, thank you. So as I was saying, we started from innovation. We were kind of redesigning, the concept of pump hydro storage and to this gravitational technology, but we're also combining new technology. So what we think, and we think also this is why energy storage is important, because as you said, nuclear, for instance, or the solar, they are different kind of form of energy, but they are also different shape of production, right? Nuclear is baseload. So you have to use nuclear 24 hours, 7 days in order to make it economical. And solar, as you said, there is nights, there is clouds, And so what you need really is, to modulate this energy, right? Because demand is modulated. It's not baseload, okay, maybe energy intensive sector, data center and stuff. But there is also the problem of transmission system, transmission lines, where you need to have security of transmission. So storage is exactly in the core of this kind of combination of new technologies and kind of new demand partners. So that's very important. So the fact that we are still looking at new technology, we just announced, for instance, a collaboration with micro reactors in the called NewCube in the US, exactly for the data center. But at the same time, we also announced a new system, which is called BNest, for giga system of batteries, because normally batteries, you need a lot of space and they're very heavy. So we were combining our technology for gravity, that we are able not to build this very big structure with, can bear very, very heavy tons of materials, also to stack batteries. On the other end, what is very important is the economic, angle of this combination of technology. What is already bankable? What is the, the best combination? We experienced a drop in price of solar panels, a drop in price of battery systems, especially in the last few months, which was amazing. Yeah. Really amazing, Something that we know is kind of incredible. So now the combined cost of solar plus a lithium battery system, it's much more competitive compared not 2 years. But as you said, this is not going to last for 24 hours, right? So you need another combination. So I think what is very important is to be flexible, to be flexible in how you design system and to be flexible also in how you combine new technology. So the approach, I think it's correct. We need to keep an eye always on what the market is doing, but since we're also a listed company, you have also to be very pragmatical, not to find the best economical and technical combination.
I just want to make a quick point on your amazing price of solar batteries. It depends which market that's going to go to. Yeah. I think they could go back up in price with the tariffs very quickly.
Oh, no, that's okay. Look, no, very good point. I mean, this is not technology driven. It's a bit more political driven, but this is true. We are a global company, and competing, in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and we are competing in Asia, and we are competing in the United States. The situation is completely different, in terms of competition. Yeah. There are prices, like in Middle East, Asia, China, where now compared to the US, with the tariff system, it's incredible the difference, okay? So again, sometimes there are also very strong political factors that can, define this mix of technologies.
I think we need like 1,000 silver bullets. So we should just do all of these things. We're not going to run out of energy demand anytime soon, so we can try them all.
Trump said, drill, baby, drill. Everybody's talking about it. The question is he going to follow through, or is that just a publicity stunt? And will this have an impact on our efforts to resolve the climate crisis?
I can take that question, if I may. Look, under Biden, there was a pause on new LNG projects coming online. That'll be lifted. The IRA is going to be narrowed down. That's the subsidy scheme for the US for energy transition. And Sorry, and I think it will have a direct impact on sentiment globally on the priorities of where investors will allocate. And investors were waiting for the outcome of the US elections. Offshore wind in the US isn't as an attractive investment as it was since Trump has come in. But I also think that large corporations that I'm in discussions with and asset managers, they will still support the energy transition. I don't think it's going to come to a halt. I just think the runway is going to be longer, and there's going to be a reprioritization of the sources of energy that we use. I'd welcome my peers' thinking. Thank you.
I think you could say a lot about Trump and what they're trying to do. I think they're definitely serious about opening up drilling. They opened up Anwar in Alaska. And that's a store of oil that's massive. And so the point of doing that may be political, so they can, push other countries around. But it is, you can't stop burning oil. And I think one of the problems we've had with some of the political rhetoric in the recent years is that, we're just got to get rid of oil altogether. We don't have any plan at all. Even I don't have a plan for that. Like, there's no tech that gets rid of oil. And so we need to be supportive of doing a good job, I think, with oil. But what we're doing is burning oil for some of the wrong reasons. You want to save it for the right reasons. Use it for the things where it really matters instead of just using it everywhere. So in order to get there, you just have to build alternatives. And we haven't done a good job of that. We've gotten a good start with solar and some wind. But the truth is, we need to scale baseload. And I think we need to scale it way beyond what people are telling you is actual demand. And so far, I think the only technology I've seen that can do that is nuclear reactors.
Luca?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's there could be some slowdown on the energy transition, maybe in some part of the world. What is quite incredible is I'm also working a lot in Middle East, and if you recently see the project that has been announced between Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, which are huge scale solar and battery systems.
And nuclear.
And nuclear, yes, and nuclear. So I would say this is a kind of movement which is driven by technology and cost and stuff that cannot be stopped, in my mind. Could be maybe slowed down in some areas, just not to see rebalancing. But there are projects. So I think everybody's trying to understand a bit better, especially my U.S. colleagues, what's going to happen in the U.S. because obviously they're on the driving seat somehow. But it seems that the transition cannot be stopped, but can be slowed down maybe.
I think an area that we should also discuss is Africa and also the emerging markets and their requirement for clean energy and the challenges that they're experiencing, because we look at projects globally at Stirling Infrastructure, not just Europe and North America. And I think you can't enable energy transition without addressing their requirements as well. And China has taken a huge initiative in enabling the energy transition, but they're still one of the world's biggest polluters by far, and India is a huge risk as well from an energy kind of consumption perspective. And the challenge that you have is that the emerging markets and the African nations, and you can't generalize all of them, of course, have poor credit rating, and investors struggle to go into those markets, but the Chinese money is more willing to go into those emerging markets, with the exception of India because of geopolitical kind of tensions. And the kind of multilateral development banks that are enabling this, which play a key role, need to kind of like support that transition. And the low cost of solar, I think, is an enabler as a starting point. But the dirty fuels, such as the diesel that's used, one of the examples I give is that you go to a country like Bangladesh or India, and you have a young child, is the analogy I use, and they put on an air conditioning unit, putting on, trying to cool themselves down using diesel, which actually has the opposite impact, just makes the world even warmer, and there's millions of people doing that, and you can see what impact that can have.
So Michael, what are you doing yourself to help with the energy transition? Like, because a lot of people say that people coming to Davos are coming here with private jets, they're saying a whole bunch of things, but then, they're just talking about stuff, but they're not actually doing anything concrete about it. But I think that you three are, and that's why I brought you here on stage. So why don't you tell our audience here what exactly you're doing concretely to make an impact for a cleaner and cooler world?
Would you like to go first?
I think that I'm lucky in the sense I get to think about these things from a more fundamental perspective. These guys have very pragmatic roles, and it's very important. And they're dealing with the geopolitical issues and things that I'm not taking into direct account in the same way. What I think is we are not slowing down on the energy transition. In order to transition, you have to build a lot of energy capacity. We just have to build. In the US, we haven't been able to do that. So it doesn't matter how many summits you have or what you talk about or how many initiatives or treaties or whatever you do. None of that solves anything about energy or climate or the things that people are concerned about. You have to build capacity. So hopefully we're in a position now where we're going to be able to build more capacity.
Capacity and distribution, I have to say that, yeah.
Yeah, that's
grid
to
networks.
Depending on what you're doing and where, of course, that's important. So, when you look at what's happening in the developing world, for better and worse, they're stuck with the technologies that we develop and create economies of scale for. I don't see a lot of developing nations being in a position to create advanced reactor technology. They can buy solar panels from China for super cheap. Why? We spent a lot of money over decades developing those things. We subsidize those markets. That's one thing you can give Germany some credit for. They subsidize the solar market so that we could get the cost down so now that we can take those things around the world. And that's the only way that it's working. So if you want to solve energy for the developing world, and I do, I'm trying to save the world, not just America, right? So to get there, we have to waste a lot of money developing these things early so that we can get the cost down and take them around the world. I want to see solar farms in Africa. I want to see nuclear reactors in India. And that's what's going to happen. The only question really is how long are we going to drag it out?
So from an innovation perspective, so your question was, what are we doing to...
What are you doing
to enable the energy transition? Well, I think I put together panels of experts from government, from industry. I had PhDs from Oxford and Cambridge and the top leading universities to help me think through what kind of discussions we should put forward. I was on a roundtable with CEOs from around the world of major utility companies in John Kerry, and carbon credits, I would say, is something that needs to actually enable the energy transition. But it's very hard to enable it when you have people's lifestyles and expectations of the way they live challenged by actually having a lower quality of life from a financial perspective, but a better kind of, I would say, cleaner air and a nicer environment to live in. So it's a huge matrix. It's not straightforward. We don't finance or support generally oil projects, but we support gas. Gas is important, and that's an energy transition fuel. But the key thing, it's got to be affordable. If it's not affordable, it won't happen. And the best way to actually enable affordability is actually the whole economy doing well and people being more productive and improving their GDP as a country, which is critical.
Okay, so what I did personally, well, I moved from the oil and gas industry to the renewable energy industry. So I used to work for more or less 10 years in a big, large multinational group, British Gas, and was mainly working on LNG, gas, and power. So when I saw that the energy transition coming, I said, well, I need to do something more than this, because the oil companies, yeah, they're starting, maybe sometimes they're starting just to put a little green label, but they are not really moving forward so quickly. So they said, no, I need to take a further step. So I moved to renewable energy. I moved to Germany. I started to work in Germany on renewables and stuff. And then I joined Energy Vault, because Energy Vault was telling me, look, there is some need for energy storage. Because, at the end of the day, you need energy storage if you want to increase the penetration of renewable energy, solar, wind, green hydrogen, and stuff. So that was my personal choice 3 years ago, okay, to move to this kind of, scale up, at that time. And I think it was a very good choice. Also because Energy Vault is a very pragmatical company. So we moved to be a product company. Hey, we had one product, this big tower. But then we realized that this big tower is, it's very great, it's great, fantastic, but you cannot build everywhere, a tower like 150 meters and so big, right? You need also the spatial place, right? Like in China, maybe in Spain, you need space, right? You cannot build these things here in Davos, for instance. So we moved to say, okay, we need additional technologies. We didn't even get back to the pump hydro idea. So now we have a new design of pump hydro with modular tanks, because pump hydro problem is the construction of the dams of the basin, which overrun budgets, right? That is the real problem. In Switzerland, we built the largest dam and pump hydro. It should take 6 years. It took 18 years, like the nuclear power plants, for problem is construction. So we designed a modular solution. Now we're implementing in Italy. So that is the kind of approach. So we are moving, with the market. We are moving with new technology, and now we are also investing. So for instance, we invested in this project in Sardinia. We are using a coal-depleted mine, and we are revamping the mine. So we are saving jobs in these mines. We do the same in California. In California, you know what happened in California, in Los Angeles, recently? It's a very terrible situation, which also impacted our families, because one of my colleagues lost his houses in the wildfire, just to give you an idea. So we were providing, now a new backup power solution, which is not diesel generation, for this town, 5,000 households in California, in the Napa Valley, where we are combining fuel cells run by green hydrogen battery system. We run the microgrid, because we are also a software company. We're an engineering software company. So we keep as I said before, we're trying to be flexible and to design new things. So and also the people inside Energy Vault is going to be adapting quickly, because this is what I think is needed.
Thanks, guys. Now I'd like to open the floor to our audience. Would anybody like to ask a few questions about the energy transition with our experts on stage?
Thank you very much for your very interesting different insights. I especially love the deep tech innovation. I work in quantum computing and AI, so I really appreciate investment. For me, the one thing I'm trying to understand, though, is I agree with capacity, but what about distribution? Because if we look at most of the energy, it's actually getting it to the people. And for example, if you look at Kenya, they have about 2 to potentially 10 gigawatts of geothermal energy available, but the problem is not going to be getting the energy actually produced. Eventually, it's getting it into the grid. And we're seeing the same thing in Europe. So how can we accelerate investment in that side, or at least look at other alternatives of microgrids, distribution, and get the policy aligned? Because that's, for me, the biggest thing slowing energy transition down.
Yeah, okay. I mean, there is a big change on how grid networks are going to be designed. So we are moving from central networks, very big power plants, and distributing power, towards the local community. Now we are going to a more distributed network, should be smarter. So we call them smart distribution. And the role of, IT support to smart grids, and also the role of storage, because normally the networks were designed on peak power, but you can reduce the peak power, because for instance, you can, store locally energy and then maybe deliver the energy when there is less connection, less needs of connection. Then you are reducing the investment in grids. In Germany, for instance, now they are kind of installing new battery system. They are called grid boosters. So they avoid not to build new network grid lines from the north, where there is a lot of wind, to the south, where there is large industrial demand, adding storage. This is quicker and cheaper. So I think it's really, and then microgrids, yes, microgrids. So if you can have microgrids somehow interconnected, then it's another way to accelerate. Otherwise, we know that building a power network at distribution level, grid level, it's going to take a long time. So we need, as we said before, now to adopt this new technology. A lot of, information technology, also smart grids, reducing, for instance, how you know when you have to need to fix a cable, because they check the status of the cable remotely, and also the power going through the lines and the heat into the lines. And this also now is checked by energy management system. So I think it's something that is moving on, but it's still, it's quite a big challenge.
So I have 5 minutes before I have to leave. So I'm going to just make, I'm going to answer your question the way that I see it. The grid network is absolutely critical, and it's evolving. And I think you need to look at it on a country-by-country basis. So some countries have a national provider that provides the connectivity across the grid, like China State Grid or whatever, or there's different regions within China. Or there's now companies that are really focusing on generating and distributing their own power for their own networks. So some companies are focusing on producing their own wind and their own solar energy, and then they have a microgrid. So you need to think about what is the objective of the grid and who's going to pay for it at the end of the day. Is it a social purpose that the government has to distribute electricity across homes? Or is it a corporation that is willing to invest in the grid to actually invest in building that grid and will look for a stable return for the investment over a defined duration for a target return on investment? Or what investors are generally liking to finance is micro-grids to companies that are bankable. They know they're going to get paid for providing the electricity and providing the grid as long as they sign a PPA for 20, 30 years. So you need to look at it and understand each individual market. Thank you. Do you have a comment on that?
Look, there's a lot of technology we have to do this. I think the grid problem is a big deal, but we have, a lot of technologies that could help make it better. High voltage AC, things that could really improve the efficiency of the grid. We have all the switching capabilities and these kind of management systems. So it takes time to upgrade those things, and so I think there's a big problem there. But also a lot of people are just opting out. If you can start to build your own capacity, and you see this happening with the data centers. The hyperscalers bought up all the energy capacity everywhere. It's part of why we have a big problem. You could go build a data center, but you're not going to turn the power on because Meta already bought it all. And so you can see even now the few nuclear reactors in the US that are available have all been bought out by the hyperscalers. And so what we need is ability for people to take this into their own hands, and that's part of why SMRs make sense. I can drop a nuclear reactor under a data center and power it. So those are things that are becoming possible that I think kind of get us around trying to put greater and greater demand on the grid.
Patrizia?
Hello, thank you. So thank you for the presentation, it was super interesting. So I'm an elected official here in Switzerland, and my daily life is constantly fighting against those people that think like going to work by bike and putting solar panels over your roof is gonna like save the planet. And so your presentation was amazing. Now, there's one thing I agree with them, is that our houses consume a lot of energy. But what I don't agree on is how to build them and how to renew them. So let's see this house, for example, is it green, is it not? Should we destroy everything and rebuild in a more greenish way? Or what is the house of tomorrow to you, and how can we improve our current housing?
I could take that question, if I may. Yeah, okay. It's the last question for me. So what I would say is that I definitely wouldn't destroy everything. That wouldn't be green or responsible. So I think best practice would be the right way to approach it. I think I think you need to understand each asset on an individual basis rather than having like a necessarily a global solution. And I think you need to put some themes in place, some high-level themes, and then you apply it to different scenarios. But my starting point would be that all new buildings should actually meet a green criteria, and it depends how green, what your definition of green is, right? Is it heating? Is it materials? Is it storing the heat? And in, for example, some countries like in the UK, it's compulsory to have an EV charger available on each house that's now built or property. There's got to be a certain number of EV charging points on every new building. So that might be an example. Now, the energy transition in Europe is not likely to slow down. I would say I think it's present and it's going to continue. I was at an FT event yesterday, which one of the things I found fascinating is that Europe's going to find it increasingly more difficult. You've got on the North American side, you have gas, lower cost production is what they're focusing on, and not going so green so fast. China has all the critical materials in the world, so they can produce batteries and all the critical materials that you require at a lower cost. And then Europe has all this bureaucracy and complexity about enabling the energy transition, which is absolutely critical, but there isn't a level playing field globally. So I think Europe, unless it gets a balanced kind of playing field in North America and China, and which will never happen anyway, it's actually becoming poorer, in my view, with all the subsidies that it's paying out and all the regulation that it's putting out. And there was a person who gave a case study in Spain yesterday that they tried to put some solar and battery, and it was so expensive and it cost so much more than what was being told, and they couldn't get the money from the EU as they thought, and it was just a waste of his total time and money. So you've got to make things easy, enable it, and not so bureaucratic, I would say, and it's too bureaucratic. So simplify things, and you need a level playing field, and that's not easy. And if you put carbon credits in, which is something that I favour, you actually make everything more expensive, and it's cheaper to make things just outside of the EU, or in the Middle East, or in Asia, or even North America. So you've got to understand the economics. If you don't understand the economics, you're actually not winning anything. You're actually disabling yourself. Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, this is our last question because we have to wrap up. So, question is just this. You could just give me the date. When will we achieve net zero?
Well, net zero on emissions in the world. We're not on a track that gets us there. That's not like one of the current options.
Just wanted a date. Because we have got to wrap up this panel. Come on, give us a date. This is your commitment, guys.
Generations from now, many.
I think the target was something like 2035. China said 2050. But realistically, I don't think we'll get there till 2070. What I'm seeing at the moment, I don't think we're on the right trajectory, and that's just a punt. But we need to do a lot more, and the population is growing, and I think it's going to get more challenging.
I definitely agree. So let's say 2050, because I'm optimistic. But it's really true necessary to go really to 100% net zero. What we normally see is that normally if you want to go, it's the Pareto rule. If you want to go to 80% of the target, you can make a cost. And then to get this last 10%, it's huge cost. So let's focus maybe not just to the slogan on net zero, but let's get quicker, to something which is close to 80%, 70% of the target. Yeah.
And last thing, with the demographic decline, don't you think we'll get to net zero faster?
Well, I mean, back to demographic decline in Europe, definitely. But in the other part of the world, China now is kind of aligning, but Africa, I mean, it's yeah. So could be that we'll need less energy, but you see about a data center now.
10x less people solves the problem.
Yeah, but it's